Do you want to crush the SAT and score 1500 plus in just 30 days? Yes, it's possible. I designed a very specific blueprint that only 1% of students use. And today I'm going to reveal 4 powerful strategies that have helped hundreds of students just like you reach their SAT goals. Stick with me because these strategies could change your entire approach to the test. Let's get started with the first one. Here's the dark secret that no one talks about. Inference questions are not about finding facts in the passage, and you've probably been doing it wrong the entire time. You may think the answer will be explicitly stated, but let me tell you, it won't be. But if you're still looking for facts in black and white, you're missing the entire point. Inference questions aren't about memorizing details. They are about understanding the deeper meaning behind the passage. So the answer will never be right there in front of you. Instead, you need to read between the lines. Now here's the secret sauce: context and tone. Inference questions are all about reading between the lines. What's the other implying without saying it outright? What's the tone? What's the bigger picture? To show you how to apply this in real time, let's look at an actual question. So here we have a socioeconomic panel, which is SOEP, and it's a study in Germany that surveys 12,000 individuals over a long period of time. So the purpose of it is to observe long-term trends in childhood development. So this requires longitudinal methods, which means tracking the same group of people over a long time. And this study needs extensive financial support due to its long-term nature. And the key point is that longitudinal methods provide valuable insights into causal relationships, cause and effects. The passage then contrasts this SOEP's method with a transportation study, a study that looks at how many people use a city's public transportation system per day. This study is not about causation, just counting people. So the passage implies that those longitudinal methods are not needed for studies like the transportation one, because it doesn't deal with causal relationships. So now let's talk about what the passage is kind of implying. So longitudinal methods are important when you're studying causal relationships, for example, how childhood development trends change over time. However, when you're counting or tracking numbers, like in a transportation study, longitudinal methods aren't really necessary. So you don't need to track the same people over time. And kind of an inference that I predicted is that the transportation study will be kind of less expensive because it doesn't really require the same long-term tracking and complex methodology as SOEP. So here's kind of a simple equation-style breakdown that illustrates the relationship between the methods and costs described in the passage. So here's the equation: cost of study equals method complexity multiplied by time frame multiplied by resource needed. Now let's apply this to the 2 studies mentioned. For SOEP, which is childhood development study, method complexity is kind of high because it's longitudinal and it tracks individuals over time. So the time frame is long because it requires years of data collection from the same individuals. And the resources needed are extensive because we need extensive financial support, resource staff, and etc. So the cost of SOEP is high because all these factors are at a higher level. For the transportation study, method complexity is low because simply counting the number of people using transportation is not a long-term tracking. So a time frame is also short because it doesn't need years of data. Just a snapshot over a short period is enough. Resource needed is minimal because it only requires basic counting, less research, and data management. So the cost of transportational study is low because the methodology and resource needed are much simpler. So The sentence in the passage ends with "and so blank." Now we need to choose the best inference, the answer that kind of best follows from the information in the passage. Let's look at answer choices. Choice A. The expense of SOEP is likely greater than the cost of longitudinal studies of transportation. So let's analyze this one. So this answer talks about comparing the expense of SOEP and transportation studies. So this passage does mention SOP needs extensive financial support, but it also contrasts with that simpler method needed for a transportation study. However, this answer is slightly off because it talks about longitudinal studies of transportation, which doesn't quite fit the passage comparison, since transportational studies don't require longitudinal studies. So our conclusion is that this answer is not the best fit because it's too focused on comparing types of studies, which isn't the main idea. Choice B. Conclusions drawn from SOEP are likely to be more authoritative than those from the transportation study. So this answer kind of implying that conclusions from SOEP will be stronger or more reliable because of its longitudinal nature. However, the passage doesn't directly discuss the quality of conclusions from the studies. It focuses more on the methodology and the cost involved, while longitudinal studies kind of provide causal insights. The passage doesn't specifically say that SOEP will give better conclusions than a transportation study. So this answer doesn't align with the main focus of the passage. Choice C. The passage emphasizes the appropriateness of different methods for different types of studies, longitudinal methods for SOP study of childhood development, which kind of requires causal insights, and a simpler method for the transportation study, which kind of needs just the counts. So answer C correctly captures the difference in suitability, noting that longitudinal methods are suitable for some studies like childhood development, but unnecessary for others like transportation. So you might be thinking, the passage isn't actually using the word suitability. But although the passage doesn't directly use the word suitability, but it does imply that by contrasting when longitudinal methods are needed versus when they're unnecessary. So let's break down the relevant parts. Purpose of SOEP in longitudinal methods. So SOEP needs extensive financial support, but this method provides valuable insights into causal relationships. So this implies that longitudinal methods are specifically chosen for causal studies like SOEP, which deals with childhood development. And if we contrast this to a transportation study, the passage then says when questions of causation are irrelevant, as in a transportation study, longitudinal methods are unnecessary. So this line hints at suitability by indicating that longitudinal methods aren't needed for studies like transportation, which don't require long-term data or causal insights. So since longitudinal methods are described as necessary for causal insights and unnecessary for simpler studies like transportation, we can infer that longitudinal methods are more suited to studies needing causal analysis like childhood development and less suited to studies that don't require it, like transportation. Choice D. The success of the transportation study likely requires significantly less financial outlay than that needed for SOEP. While D is kind of logical based on the cost details provided, it shifts focus on the expense comparison. So the passage's main focus is on the appropriateness of those methods, not solely on the costs. If you want, you can also join a free SAT community where you can access to my free course and free webinars that I host. Let me guess, you've been frustrated with main idea questions. They kind of seem impossible, right? Well, what if I told you that by recognizing a single pattern in the structure of a passage, you can actually nail those main idea questions every single time? And no, it's not about memorizing every detail. It's more about understanding how authors structure their content or passage. If you can spot this one key element, main idea questions will be like a walk in the park. So you might be thinking, why structure matters? SAT reading isn't random. It's designed to follow a pattern. Once you recognize that pattern, you will save time and improve accuracy on every single question. Let's talk about the three main structures you will encounter and how you can use them to crush those questions. The most common structure, introduction, and then the key takeaway. The author introduces the topic or problem in the beginning, but the main idea comes at the end, and you will find this especially in passages on more scientific topics like climate change or etc. The last sentences usually hold the new, groundbreaking information. That's your main idea. Structure number 2. Next, we have a continuous narrative. The author takes you on a journey, developing one idea through the passage. The main idea here is about understanding the overall points the author is building throughout. This is a classic structure for history and science passages. You will see the old understanding replaced by a new one. A passage might start by saying, scientists use it to think X, but now we know why. The key to unlocking the main idea. What changed? What's the new information that replaces the old understanding? But I've seen so many students who just struggle to spot them. So that's why I created 3 ways to spot them. So the first way is look at the first few sentences. Is it a problem being introduced or a new discovery? Second, pay attention to the end of the passage. That's where the takeaway often lives, but not all the time. Third way, follow the rhythm. Does the passage follow a journey or build on one idea? And this is how you go from confused to confident in your SAT reading section, by knowing exactly what you're looking for. And you have to start using these techniques and watch how much more manageable SAT reading becomes. And if you found this strategy helpful, make sure you subscribe for more SAT tips. Strategy number 3. So first, before telling what the strategy is, I want to show you how to use it in this particular question. So here we have a quadratic equation and it only has one solution. So we need to find the value of r. First off, let's rewrite the equation in standard quadratic form. 4x squared minus 32x plus 19 minus r equals 0. So now we've got our quadratic equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is 4, b is minus 32, and c is 19 minus r. So far so good, right? But here's where the magic happens. Step number 2, the discriminant method. To know when there is exactly one real solution, we use the discriminant from the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is this, so the discriminant is the part under the square root. B squared minus 4ac equals 0. Now let's apply this, and here we get minus 32 squared minus 4 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 19 minus r equals 0. And if we simplify that, we get 1024 minus 16 multiplied by 19 minus r equals 0. So let's distribute the minus 16. So here we get 720 plus 16r equals 0. So now let's isolate r. And we get r minus 45. So there you have it. R equals minus 45. Now we know that when r equals minus 45, the quadratic equation will have exactly one real solution. Pretty fast and straightforward, right? Let's move on to the 4th strategy. You're about to master digital SAT vocab questions with a strategy so simple, it will leave you wondering why you didn't think of it first. But trust me, this approach works, and it's exactly how you can start seeing massive improvements on your SAT vocab scores in no time. So the first thing that you need to do is to stop overcomplicating it. Instead of cramming 100 plus new words every single day, Focus on mastering how 10 of these words work within sentences. This way, when you're faced with tricky vocab questions, you won't need to guess the definition. You will already know what the word means based on its context. Here's the trick that really works: prefixes. These little parts of words can unlock a ton of meaning, and when you learn 32 prefixes needed for the SAT, you will start recognizing them in almost every single passage. This is a game changer, trust me. To make it even easier for you, I've put together a PDF of the 32 prefixes you need to know for the SAT. The link is in the description and it's completely free. And you can start using these prefixes right away to help break down words you will see on test day. But hey, if you think this strategy alone will solve all your vocab problems, you're completely wrong. And in the next video, I broke down 3 more strategies that will give you even more tools to master SAT vocab questions. So make sure to check it right after this one.